this is pretty big. Also good to have you, Nebulation. This is pretty big. I got a press email about this. I missed the prior ones. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, Lord, like this is a big fucking deal. So RPC Gaming, I actually think that this didn't get as much publicity as it deserved. We are digital and human rights advocates. We are digital and human rights advocates. Ask us anything about payment processors censoring adult content on Steam and itch.io. We are digital and human rights advocates concerned about payment processors censoring adult content on Steam and itch.io. Ask us anything. itch.io and Steam recently revealed that they have been under pressure from payment processors to remove, de-index, and otherwise suppress adult content on their platforms. Financial censorship is nothing new, and our panel is ready to share insights into how to resist from groups who have been fighting it for years. So I'm going to actually link this out. If we could get this pinned mods, that would be amazing. The panelists from this is from Monday. Matt Lane, Senior Policy Counsel at Fight for the Future. Cody Vence, Senior Policy Counsel in the ACLU's National Political Advocacy Department. Cliff Braun, that sounds he sounds like he's like they put him in a Die Hard sequel. Like Cliff Braun has taken the place of Bruce Willis. Associate Director of Technology Policy and Research at EFF. Eric Sipe, U.S. National Organizer, 7MLE. Gibran Ludwig, Policy Strategist at Fight for the Future. So I'm going to go through the answered questions. Mine's going to appear here, so we'll read that one as well. We'll be going over what they say, and I'll be clarifying specifically who said what. So this is going to be a lot of reading. It is going to be worth your time because we're going to get a lot of good answers from these different panelists and from these various major organizations. I want to stress something really quickly, that the fact that we got Fight for the Future, EFF, ACLU, 7MLE all together for a panel is not a coincidence. This was done on purpose. It was obviously done because people were contacting folks like the ACLU and saying, hey, can you do something about this? It was also very obviously done to show their interest in this and to encourage people to continue pushing. The overall impression that I've gotten is that the ACLU is aware that this is going on, but they're a little bit avoiding doing anything about it politically in terms of like advocating for legal or legislative answers. I think the ACLU honestly thinks that public pressure is the answer for this stage of the fight. And I say stage of the fight as in the long-term issue of payment processor censorship of the entire internet. They do seem to stress that like raw numbers of petitions they can send to politicians is important right now. So let's go over it. Cliff Braun's constantly having to cling to a ledge and shoot a gun at the same time. So true. All right, so this was, I believe, the most upvoted question. What do you think they realistically want to gain from all of this, and why is it worth it to them? Matt Lane from, that's his name, right? Matt Lane. I thought so. Fight for the Future, Matt Lane. This is a great question because it brings in the greater problem. Censorship is a hard thing to advocate for in most countries. In the US, we have strong First Amendment laws that protect speech. Globally, there's a lot of pressure for free speech, and a lot of civil society groups recognize that censorship is a slippery slope. Once countries build the capacity for censorship, it becomes easier to censor more and more content, either accidentally or intentionally. Politically, it can be very unpopular, as we are seeing with the UK Online Safety Act. However, payment processors are a weak link in online speech. Payment processors are risk-averse and seem generally willing to work with pro-censorship groups like Collective Shout. This is a known tactic for indirectly censoring speech that is so effective that EFF has devoted a landing page to collecting all the stories of financial censorship. You can take a look here. Almost 2,500 times. I'm a burper. How you doing, George Caliber? I am a base chubby VTuber girly. That's so true. That's actually so true and based. I'm a burper. To collecting all the stories of financial censorship, Steam and itch.io are just the latest in a long line of targeted anti-speech campaigns. From Fight for the Future as well, from Cliff Braun via EFF. Great answer from Matt. I'd highlight that payment processors are risk-averse. In this case, they likely perceive the risk of upsetting the gaming community as less than that from the Collective Shout campaign. And then we see a little bit of information from here about caving government pressure, Visa and MasterCard shut down payments back page. from 2015. In other cases, political pressure is involved, the above censorship of backpage payments and PayPal's refusal to serve Palestinians. Sometimes just because Jack wants to. At Square, they decided to refuse to process weapons transactions just because of one person in leadership's views. I think Cliff here gives a really good answer and explanation that essentially one thing that we have to do, and write this down, take notes, write this down. One thing we have to do is be seen as a worse group to piss off than a bunch of Australian Karens, right? It has to seem to MasterCard and Visa and everyone else that it will be a shit show if they keep censoring the internet in this way. They will have people drawing the most sexy but also degen porn of MasterCard and Visa. People will shit on the brand. They will embarrass them. They'll flood all their social medias. It needs to be a headache for everybody involved to ever do something like this again. And also, we need to keep pushing. We need to stay on top of it. There needs to be so much pressure. There needs to be this feeling of like, don't fuck with the gamers and don't fuck with like the artists, right? Don't fuck with the gays, you know? So we need to be a little Batman, you know? We need to be a little bit even in our villain arc, our anti-hero arc. We have to be annoying and make the brand look like shit. That is sort of the message I'm getting from this answer. All right, here's another one. This is from JL. Who's JL again? Oh, that's Gibran from Fight for the Future. Realistically, how effective are the common calls to action we've been seeing, like calling our credit card companies? I worry all that will accomplish is cause the customer service agent to be the target of abuse. If you're polite to the person on the other end, it certainly isn't going to cause any harm. Public pressure can be effective, but changing the direction of large and powerful institutions requires concerted, organized effort. Sometimes a company might respond to customer complaints, but you can't count on that working. A petition is more likely to further a campaign by generating media attention and getting people mobilized around an issue than it is to actually convince the company to change their behavior. Bad press and scrutiny by politicians are strong motivators. It's hard to know for sure why the payment processors pressure these platforms, but they may have been responding to advocacy efforts which have framed censoring the internet as necessary to protect children. It's up to all of us to get organized and protect our free speech. If you're looking for a place to start, we have a petition up right now. Now, obviously, I do agree that signing petitions can be helpful. Although I do want to stress, you know, advocacy groups are also looking to get connected with people to donate to them, to help support them in their initiatives, to spread the word on social media about the group, and the things the group is doing. So there is always going to be a little bit of bias from any panelists when they tell you sign our petition, if they're connected to a specific organization. So I just do want to point that out. But I think this is good advice. I definitely think as well that I think any opportunity to get the press to turn their heads and report on it, and I think any opportunity to, again, make the brand look bad publicly, whether it's in a crass way or a not so crass way, I think is really good. See if there's anything else in these connections worth pointing out. Oh, ACLU. For some reason, the ACLU like wasn't getting tagged in this with Cody. All right, ACLU Cody. Great gamer tag. Imagine getting like one-tapped by ACLU Cody in the clutch and Val. I can't speak for their intentions, but their campaigns generally seek to eliminate or severely curtail sexual content online and off. Their homepage is by Collective Shout. Their homepage current features campaigns to ban porn on X, for retailers to divest from Playboy, to deplatform Snoop Dogg, and for divestment from strip clubs. They are, of course, free to issue these calls. That's their First Amendment right. And the real concern here is the moves by infrastructure-like entities, card payment processors, to make editorial decisions and quietly deplatform unpopular speech. I talk about those concerns in this comment below. Let's actually go ahead and just go straight to it. Let me catch up with chat. No sound? Wait. Are you guys hearing me? You should be, right? Okay. Yeah, I was like, looking at OBS. I was like, huh? There is sound. Okay, I was like, what? We need the true hero of our time. We need anal violence, AV, doing some anal justice on PayPro. So true. We gotta become the payment. I can't believe I just read that. I literally didn't process that comment. What did I just say out loud on my stream? I still read it. We got to become the payment processor Joker. So true. All right. Burp. Do you think adding decentralized forms of payment such as Bitcoin is possible for platforms like Steam and itch.io? We like decentralization and have advocated for protecting it, but there is no way it would scale today to replace what Steam and itch could lose if the payment processor stopped working with them. They'd have to teach every customer how to use it in addition to building out the backend support. This is why it's effective for groups to lobby payment processors. They have tremendous power over online companies, and that power isn't dissipating anytime soon. Matt Lane from Fight for the Future. Note as well that we're talking about a situation where Leaf himself at itch.io has directly said he has no interest in crypto. So the crypto conversation is kind of dead in the water. I think too that I think crypto might eventually become more popular in these payment methods. But like I've discussed on other news streams and in general on this, I think crypto is going to be the last solution people sigh and try. There's going to be a lot of attempts to switch to other platforms, try to generally pressure the payment processors, and just avoid using crypto as much as possible because crypto's brand has been sunken by, let's be honest, scammers. And just the kind of like pump and dump nature, and not in the fun, sexy way, the pump and dump nature of crypto. So, I mean, like when I talked about, hey, crypto might eventually be the answer, people in my own community and in my own stream got really upset. And understandably, I think, too. When I said, like, hey, it could be an answer. Twin Tails 8, hello. I hope you're doing well. All right, ACLU set. It might. One of the biggest threats here is the fact that the payment card market is incredibly concentrated, with MasterCard and Visa issuing around 70% of the cards in circulation. This is to the question of, do you think decentralized forms of payment such as Bitcoin is possible for platforms? This gives them tremendous power, including over our speech. Although private actors like payment card networks aren't subject to the First Amendment, their power can still raise concerns, especially when they occupy an infrastructural position that doesn't traditionally make editorial decisions and lurks behind traditional consumer-facing editorial actors like newspapers or social media. That's why we have had rules governing things like landline telephones, cable TV, broadcast TV, and broadband providers. RIP net neutrality. Pour one out. We've written about the costs of using infrastructure to police unpopular speech here, the cost of forcing an online haven for racists off the internet. Decentralized payment platforms still face challenges, including governmental surveillance efforts, but may be a part of the answer. So actually, this is pretty interesting. And it seems like there's a little bit of a disagreement here between Fight for the Future and ACLU, where ACLU is sort of like, yeah, Bitcoin could be part of the answer, whereas Fight for the Future is like a little bit like kind of not trying to be like the biggest Bitcoin advocates in the world. Crypto is too unstable. I agree. I think the only way crypto would possibly work is like a very easy way to quickly convert income to like what you'd like to pay to crypto, pay it out, and get out of that equation as fast as possible. And it just would be too much for like scalable infrastructure. Like that works for like buying weed off the internet, you know? Like that works really well for buying weed off the internet from some guy that's like maybe 5 blocks from you. It doesn't work quite as well for like the sheer volume of transactions that someone like itch.io is doing at the moment. Like Pornhub has like crypto as like a pay method, but I doubt most people have ever touched it. Gray market estrogen vials, so true. I've had to use crypto to buy stuff that PayPros won't touch. It's not uncommon. It's really not uncommon. People are just like not. It's just you don't know how like crypto purchase methods, even though a lot of transactions, like I think like 1 in 10 on the internet right now are crypto based. But unless you've ever purchased something on a gray market or like purchased something that like maybe you shouldn't have, people don't know. Now I've talked to people who have, you know, made those kinds of purchases. So I'm aware of like what goes on with them. Realistically, how effective are the common calls to action we've been seeing, like calling our... Oh, wait, we already read that. Okay. Side note, evidently in the UK, underage children are using masks of adult faces printed out to get around restrictions on certain platforms that check age via webcams, but also Blue Sky in the UK is apparently requiring a credit card on file or an ID to access, if I'm not misinformed, which touches on the quote-unquote paywall culture where financial institutions inject themselves in as identity qualifiers. ACLU says, there are 2 facts about age verification that are becoming obvious as the UK Online Safety Act and other laws in Europe are rolled out. 1. It is infinitely more complicated to verify someone's age online than it is IRL. And 2. There is no standard accepted method for AV. AV. And the methods we have can harm privacy and access to speech. European authorities currently enforcing AV laws there are running headlong to this issue. See this recommendation from France's online civil liberties watchdog, CNIL. One of those is the bootstrap method of making a small payment on the theory that only adults have access to credit cards. Of course, that is ignoring the fact that many minors do have access to credit cards and that many adults do not. So this solution is simultaneously over and under inclusive. The EFF has a recent blog post about the harmful impacts of age verification technology that isn't even effective. I do think the UK Online Safety Act stuff is so unpopular and it's proving such a headache to enforce. And there's like the lawsuit, like the 4chan one, that it is just, I'm nervous about age verification closing the internet and Online Safety Act itself being the first step to closing the internet. First major step to close like a nation's internet. And then also as well, we see like OSA being put in piecemeal across different US states, essentially, in so many words, like OSA like infrastructure through these age verification measures. But I would say these state ID laws is what I would call them. I would say that there might be a silver lining here in the sense that people really have turned against age verification. People didn't even know that this was coming in the UK for a long time, even though I've been keeping tabs on the UK situation myself. I've been aware that was coming. People really didn't know this was coming, and people didn't realize how much they would hate it. But this hit right when all the collective shout stuff did. And it's been so bad for age verification as a policy, like the structure of age verification, as well as literally the OSA. This is one of the most disastrous technology policy rollouts that we've seen all year, and it's probably going to be one of the most disastrous technology policy rollouts that we see. Period. It is so widely unpopular. And I think, honestly, I do think there's a silver lining here in the sense that whether it's the legal issues, the fact that age verification stuff it's really hard to verify someone's age, and it just does not work. Like the technology, it just cannot work the way people want it, truly, to these legislators. I think there is a possibility that people start to pull back these laws or just call a spade and say, hey, you know what it actually is about? It's actually about trying to censor porn. I think that's another possibility as well. They just rip the mask right off. It's trying to control what you can access on the internet. They might just try to rip the mask off. But it's just it's such a fucking mess. Like the ACLU here is pointing out exactly how it's such a fucking mess. And it's not working the way it's intended. And the UK can say, and this I think is +1 to the idea that the UK might rip the mask off and say what their true intentions are. You know, we've seen the government say, oh yes, like we've decreased access to Pornhub by 50% or whatever. That's so amazing. But the reality is that it's not doing what the law is supposedly trying to say. And it's massively unpopular. An incredibly unpopular law. Incredibly unpopular. So I think there's a silver lining here in the public backlash and the sheer disgust and anger at age verification as a measure, to the point where a lot of people in the press are talking about how bad it is. Like, this was one article I was considering reading today. If we have time, porn censorship is going to destroy the internet from Mashable, who's always been really good on this issue in general. It's not feeling like... It's not feeling like the politicians are winning on this one. It's really not. It's really not. Yeah, well, it could be stable if you had someone monitor it. I lost mine. Crypto won't be trying that ever again. Yeah. I work in AV. That's when someone co-works in my stomach. They work in AV. Also, that is a perfect thumbnail, by the way. Homer, I just saw the other one you got. Labor Party using to hurt trans community for the most part. Yeah. Okay. Let us continue. FFF says, from Matt Lane, we've been fighting age verification laws because of their impacts on speech, privacy, and security. The speech issue is a big one because what is quote-unquote adult content doesn't have clear boundaries and often intentionally or unintentionally includes content that could be important for youth to have access to. You'll see some of these state ID laws, they say harmful to minors, quote-unquote, and it should be unsurprising that there's been this astroturfed campaign from conservatives who argue that LGBTQ, sex education material, or even just more specifically over time, stories about like trans and queer narratives and, trans and queer acceptance is considered quote unquote harmful to minors. So another aspect of this as well that EFF doesn't touch on, but is connected to what it touches on, is the idea that a lot of these state ID laws in the US are going to use phrases like quote unquote harmful to minors for what kind of content needs to be, what kind of content thus requires to access a site, age verification. And it's a very vague term that could be expanded. And that's not a coincidence. That's not a coincidence at all. Reason has a good write-up of examples from the UK Online Safety Act. We have also highlighted how LGBTQ here we go. Content is often categorized as adult, regardless of whether it contains anything sexual. Some states in the US are introducing laws to expressly classify all LGBTQ content as adult. Don't you love it when I start like explaining like this is good, but they forgot this part, and then I read the next part, I'm like, oh my god, they like the exact thing I said they should say, they said. It's almost like whatever the policy folks are saying is stuff I'm thinking about, and then when the policy folks say it, I'm like, oh my god, you were thinking about the same things I was. Oh, here's me. I'm actually pretty high up in this chain. I'm like one of the, relatively speaking. Okay, so we'll read my answers. We'll read my questions and the answers. All right, so Anna Valens here. That's me. I'm just going to skip straight to the questions. Segueing right from what I wrote, there's been such an enormous public response to this kind of pay-pro censorship. Does this feel a bit unprecedented? Do you think something is shifting in the public's perception on the censorship of adult content, of platform and payment processor censorship? 2, we've seen sustained call, writing, and social media advocacy campaigns for the past couple of weeks. What other steps do you believe concerned activists, organizers, and customers should take? What's next? And 3, financial censorship is very, very complicated. A lot of people are learning in real time that purchasing a video game is more complex than, quote, using your Visa card to take money out of your bank. But now that they know how many aspects of financial companies are, well, censorious, it seems like people want the system to change. Do you think there are potential steps to change things in the US through the legal system, legislation, or even an executive order? Hey, Dan Map, AC Valens stands for alternating current valens. Actually, so true. It feels dank, man. It means you're a genius. Actually, so true. I'm like so base. Okay, so I actually, Fight for the Future had some really good responses here. Let's see what else as well. The ACLU too. So let's read Fight for the Future first. It's from Matt Lane. So for number 1, about like, do you think there's a shift in public pressure or public perception? We've seen public responses before, but this does seem different. Speaking as someone who has been a lifelong gamer and who works in advocacy, it is interesting watching the community's response through both lenses. I think the gaming community has recognized the threat of censorship as a hobby. The threat of censorship as a hobby that has often been attacked in various moral panics throughout the decades. Maybe because of that, a lot of gamers are willing to step up and speak out when they might not even be purchasers of adult games themselves. They understand that this is their problem too. I've also found that gamers are really good at breaking down bigger challenges into manageable tasks and completing them, which is pretty much the basics of all advocacy. As for what other steps do you believe concerned activists should take? The most important thing is solidarity and keeping attention on these companies. The risk aversion of payment processors cuts both ways. We've already seen that they hate this kind of attention. And as for the question of legislature, legal system, and EO, I wouldn't yet recommend to pivoting towards a political fix. As I mentioned in another post, the politics on this are too messy to take energy away from public pressure that seems to be working. There is an EO, this is the one we've talked about, that might be helpful, and seeing how it plays out will give us a lot of helpful information in the policy fight. This is an interesting thing because after I did my video about the EO and I said kind of calm down folks, this is not going to save us, I did see Free Speech Coalition also suggest that this might be a good step in the right direction and actually provide some fixes about the debanking issue, especially because I'll point it out over here. The mention of Operation Checkpoint, and I did talk about this, the Obama era policy that also targeted pornography, and how much this EO hates Operation Chokepoint, is a good sign. And it could mean that while this seems to be focused on conservatism and stuff, it could also mean that a broader debanking happens in general. We just have to wait and see. It's hard to say. I don't think that the Trump admin is coming in to save us on this, but it might make it so. I believe does the ACLU talk about this? Maybe the EFF. I forget who said it. I don't think I wasn't the one who said it. I'm cribbing this from someone else, but I've seen said that this might allow for when it comes to the question of payment processors becoming particularly risk averse because of Operation Choke Point's focus on pornography and like building in kind of essentially like these more risk aversion steps from payment processors from like was like banks and credit banks and stuff banks. It might lead to less pressure on banks to be risk averse, which might just kind of make it take a little bit of pressure off in general, the whole entire e-commerce equation, and make it a little easier for adult content and content of art and artistry that is considered a little bit more taboo and a little bit more sensitive. Banks might be a little less censorious. Payment processors might be a little less censorious. So we actually do have to see. I think it's a good alternate opinion on this. I was not as optimistic, but I actually think after seeing what others have said, I'm a little bit more optimistic that maybe this could help. But it's not going to be a silver bullet. It's like one moving part in many moving parts. We have to remember, again, MasterCard is still very concerned about its brand. It's very concerned about what kind of content it processes. And that, it's very clear to us that banks feel similarly. And even PayPal and Stripe have their own reservations about adult content that should be highlighted. ACLU says, I'm not going to read my own responses. I don't want to stroke myself off too hard. Thanks, Anna. I'm certainly excited about the breadth and depth of the response, but I'm not sure if it's entirely unprecedented. The ACLU and others led similar campaigns in defense of processors' efforts to deplatform sex workers. And a related petition, also on sex workers and payment processors, garnered tens of thousands of signatures. Hey, wait, which one is that? Oh, no way. It's the one we were all working on. That's crazy. Moreover, we have historically seen online communities like artists and gamers mobilize quickly in response to threats, as seen in recent activism around net neutrality and, for those who remember, SOPA PIPA. In terms of potential next steps, there are myriad existing laws regulating banks, payment processors, and the financial industry at large, but the Trump administration has largely rolled back their reach. This has included terminating 90% of CFPB staff and eliminating FTC proceedings or consent decrees against those entities. Moreover, any legislation will need to address some outstanding First Amendment questions. For example, the Supreme Court determined in Moody v. Net Choice that the First Amendment protects social media platforms' content moderation decisions, including who to platform or not. In some ways, that might feel a bit like what payment processors are doing. However, there are important historical wrinkles. In many instances, entities like payment processors have not traditionally exercised First Amendment editorial decisions, unlike newspapers or social media. Likewise, regulations of business conduct and business relationships that have an incidental impact on speech, assembly, or association may be upheld. These are all questions that would have to be unpacked and makes theorizing about legislation in the abstract hard. These difficulties are a big reason why a popular response like what we've been seeing are so essential. I really want to highlight this. I think that I really like the ACLU's response here because they are not bullshitting about any steps they can take. They're making it. I think personally that this is not just a really good response, but has made me better understand that we might not be able to get significant help from the ACLU in terms of literal legislature. It might have to be more lobbying politicians or more generally beating the drum, because what the ACLU is essentially saying, and this is why you might see the ACLU be hesitant at times, even though they support the public outreach, i.e. doing this panel, is, as been outlined here, that it is a very complicated issue in American institutions. It is insanely complicated. There are many questions that have to be answered. There are changes in how things are operating due to the Trump administration. And generally speaking, it's not like there can just be a case taken to SCOTUS and end all of this, right? It's actually a really complicated issue that's unfolding, and I would argue, this is my own personal analysis, likely because of the fact that the e-commerce structure that exists is both still relatively new, a little unprecedented in terms of the sheer range of data it covers and the sheer range of processing of payments. You know, this is no longer a situation where we're talking about like you know, it's not like, say, a credit card deciding like whether bookstores can carry a product. Like, this is a very complicated thing. It's there's a lot more control that MasterCard and Visa has in this equation of how we use the internet to process payments, and in general there's just a lot of questions to solve. So I think this is not just a really good answer from the ACLU, but it's also suggested to me that we should be putting our resources to pressuring politicians, to making MasterCard and Visa look bad in the realm of the public eye, putting public pressure on MasterCard and Visa and hurting their brand by pointing out how censorious they are, as well as, you know, other payment processors. Generally just pointing out that, hey, you know, the ACLU is a really good advocate in this fight, but it's not like they can just like sue somebody and fix it. You know what I mean? It's not like, you know, sue someone and fix it. It's very, 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 very complicated. That's why you might see the ACLU, if you call them, be a little hesitant or kind of maybe try to get you to contact someone else instead of focus with them. I think you should still call the ACLU. I think they need to continue to be reminded that this issue is not going to go away and that we want them to continue to speak out on it, like in this AMA. But I think it's a good example of how the ACLU, again, cannot wave a magic wand and fix it. It's very complicated. It means you're a genius. Based. The ACLU is kind of tied up with trying to get DC out of martial law too, so they're a touch busy at the moment. Yeah, I mean, the other thing too is just there's only so much they really can do, because they're, and I've talked about this too, a lot of organizers, a lot of activists, a lot of advocates are putting out a lot of fires right now, so there is also a certain limit to which they can put out this fire. Does that kind of make sense? Like, there is so much going on that they have to stay on top of, and the ACLU has kind of been, I think, de facto deputized by the public to be the main advocate for our civil liberties against this administration. So it is also, as Cassie said, it is very challenging. Like, it's just a very challenging situation for the ACLU as well, because there is a lot on their plate. It's not like they can put significant resources to this fight when there are many other fights going on. You know, I've traditionally found in my own activist and advocate networks that folks not connected immediately to the gaming adult industry realm we're not even following the collective shout stuff until it started to blow up more and more, because of the fact that everyone is really busy handling other things going on, you know? So just another reason why continuing to be loud on social media, continuing to poke and prod people, continuing to be a problem for MasterCard and Visa is really important, because there is a lot that you're competing for people's attentions on right now. There is so much going on. One of the reasons why I focus really hard on this specific issue is because we've talked about this a lot in the negative realm, in the sense that people look for things that they can impact by, i.e. by like grabbing someone and shaking them when they're not the cause of a problem. This is a situation where it's very obvious to me that all of us can grab MasterCard and Visa and shake them around and put pressure on them. And as the ACLU and the EFF have suggested, it's working. It's a good thing, and we should keep going in the direction that we've been going. So it's one reason why I personally am putting a lot of my focus on this issue, is because I do think it's one that we collectively can pressure these companies to change their policies and the ways they're engaging with Steam and Itch.io and other digital storefronts. I hope that makes sense. However important laws are, literally society deciding something cuts through enough red tape of bureaucracy is sometimes the best move. Escape from New York being a prediction. Apparently New York City and Chicago are next with the whole National Guard thing. I think so too. Although I'm used to New York City being a very militarized police force. I remember being in New York about a decade ago, and you would see like completely militarized NYPD officers walking around places with assault rifles, and also the National Guard has always been in things like Penn Station and stuff. So, I believe after the United Healthcare assassination, I remember the National Guard being a little bit more active in New York. So I do want to stress too, with New York, that's it's not fully unprecedented. Like, it's going to get worse here in New York, but it's not fully unprecedented either. It's not fully unprecedented. The National Guard has always been kind of wandering around here, and I think seeing more like 3-letter agencies operate around New York City would not surprise me that much. Like, it's just a lot of this stuff is like just an intense escalation of what's always been going on since the Patriot Act in the end. I think it's always important to contextualize that too. That like there's a longer history here of like ramping up to this militarized like fascist America. Is there any serious political movement or will anywhere to classify common payment processors in the same way, say, water or electrical utilities are, forcing more neutrality on how they operate and how much they charge for it? I really agree with doing this personally. FFF, Fight for the Future, says, in short, no, I think a lot of the energy that would have gone to an effort like this has been focused on cryptocurrencies, which are likely not a practical solution for many people. The closest thing I can think of is the campaign for postal banking. I don't know much about this. It's something that I'll come back to later. That's Cliff Braun saying that. I would like to help by filing complaints with the credit card service lines. However, I believe MasterCard in particular, they ask for new card members to inquire inputs for membership, and I do not have a MasterCard. I'm not sure how to reach their customer service general line. I've only been able to leave a voicemail with the payment processor Stripe so far. Do you have any tips or resources on how to make our complaints known to these companies and navigate their phone call mazes? Thank you. All right, this is from JL from Fight for the Future. As I mentioned in another response, customer service complaints have some impact, but organized action is more effective. It's worth remembering that customer service is separate from the decision makers at these companies. Customer dissatisfaction may trickle up to those who need to hear it, but petitions and social media campaigns are better for getting the attention of the people who are responsible for these choices. Media and government scrutiny puts even more pressure on these companies. This is one reason why I've been encouraging folks to do like the memes and the art making fun of MasterCard and Visa, because I think if just like making fun of MasterCard and Visa becomes like a meme and like the brand gets hit so hard by just like people clowning on them, I think it'll also embarrass MasterCard and Visa a lot. Like they'll be ashamed and they'll check their social medias and they'll just see people being like, you know, like, here's a Pepe meme making fun of you type shit. Like eventually it's just going to get to MasterCard and Visa. They'll be like, oh my God, our social medias are cooked. We can't even communicate effectively because everyone just like mobs us. Will the Fair Access to Banking Act improve, conditions on this issue? I've been hearing advocates mention it. Let me read what you said. I've already made plans to leave the city since my neighborhood is one likely to be strongly targeted. If it's anything like DC, you'll see an unarmored vehicle outside every subway station. Anyone who looks suspicious will get beaten and or arrested at random. Yeah, I'm very nervous about that. Like I don't think my neighborhood will be as targeted compared to other ones, but I'm just going to like not go outside, which is what I've already done. So it's not great. It's not great. All right, this is a tough one to answer because it's wrapped up in politics to a certain extent. Financial censorship doesn't fall neatly along ideological lines, which may lead you to think it would be bipartisan in a good way. That hasn't happened yet. Different factions of different parties fall into different camps on whether all speech should be protected. Only some speech should be protected, and what speech should be censored if they are pro-censorship. Even among strong free speech members of Congress, there is still a lack of trust because politicians are afraid of a bad deal that still allows censorship of the communities they represent. That is a long way of saying that S401 is currently positioned very partisan, no D-sponsors, support from traditionally R-aligned industries. And because of that, the bill doesn't seem to have much hope of passing the Senate's 60-vote threshold or getting any clarifying edits that it does cover adult content. As written, it could be interpreted to help stem issue, but that would ultimately be up to courts once it's tested. The fact that it does have a private right of action is good, though, because it means those impacted can bring a lawsuit on their own instead of having to rely on a government agency that might only bring cases that benefit quote-unquote their side. Relatedly, there's an interesting development in that Trump signed an executive order very similar to this bill. A lot of people have essentially said that the EO was just kind of trying to push the bill in through the executive. Again, adult content doesn't seem to be an intended beneficiary, but the policy director of the Adult Industry Association did express cautious optimism that could protect the adult industry, and that would also mean adult games. This just goes to show that the politics on this are weird, and that could impact who benefits and who doesn't. This is Mike Stable. I was mentioning this earlier. While caution is warranted and there's plenty still left to do, I like Mike a lot, by the way. I think he's a smart cookie. This potentially huge news for adult businesses. Banks and credit cards will be effectively prohibited from discriminating against quote-unquote lawful businesses or using quote-unquote affiliation to deny or close accounts. I am not... Oh, yes, I love that, by the way, Homer. This is not... Hey, Sandrock. Hope you're doing well. This is not... what was I going to say? Mike Stable is someone I think is really, really smart. I think he's got a really good handle on thinking about this issue long term. And I do think that he has a good read on this. I initially disagreed with this kind of assessment, but him putting this out there has challenged my opinion on it a little bit, because this is someone who is working in the weeds on policy stuff around this day in and day out. I'm just a journalist that covers it, you know, when this issue flares up, and I go back and bring up the background of it. So his feeling on this, as pointed out again by Fight for the Future, does leave me feeling a little bit more confident that maybe it could lead to some positive changes. I think it's telling that Fight for the Future feels the way, but the ACLU hasn't necessarily given in these comments yet a W to Trump over this. I haven't seen that. And I do want to note in general that I've generally agreed with Matt Lane on this one over here about S410. This is why, you know, Fair Access to Banking Act is not something I've talked about as much as a solution, because I don't fully trust that it could help. I could be good. I do think it's an accurate assessment that because the Democrats are not really in on this act, that it's probably not going to get through the Senate. I think it would be wise to get them in on it, but I think that the GOP is mainly focused on benefiting conservatives. I don't think that they're really committed to like a larger free speech issues. We've seen again that Republicans generally are more principled in the stand for their own party's free speech as opposed to the general concept of free speech, although that isn't always true. Alrighty, let's continue. Aren't they claiming AO content is illegal content currently, though? Not the government. No. Not the government. And I think it's important to understand that MasterCard, Visa, when they're talking about the idea of not processing illegal transactions, they're trying to, it's a PR term. They're not saying that like they're not saying specifically that like Sisterly Lust is an illegal game. What they're trying to imply is that like there's some hidden mysterious illegal games that they've been trying to get out. Like it's more like they're trying to get people to not pay too close attention to the reality of this about being illegal content. Does that make sense? But we're talking about the government here anyway. We're not talking about like we're talking about the government here. This is about like government policy, government content, how the government engages in the question of free speech and financial institutions. Because at the end of the day, the government can come in if debanking does, therefore, if these debanking policies mean that banks essentially like cannot discriminate against adult content, then the federal government or, you know, a lawsuit in general could come in and essentially say, hey, like you are discriminating based on, you know, the political status of a sex worker or so, or adult content creator. Hi, Ikaba. I hope you're doing well. We're reading through the AMA for EFF and the ACLU. The policy AMA. A MasterCard, Visa, Steam, itch.io. The latest I heard from Steam is secondary payment processors like PayPal are citing MasterCard's ambiguous quote-unquote protection from reputational harm clauses in their contracts to push for censorship of games on Steam. Meanwhile, MasterCard itself put out a statement saying they do not evaluate games or require any restrictions on gaming platforms. What can Steam do to fight against these secondary payment processors who seem to be censoring on behalf of MasterCard despite being in contravention of MasterCard's public statements on this issue? What can the public do to help? These conflicting statements show that public pressure and attention is working. This is from Matt Lane. Neither side wants the blame. That gives companies like Steam more leverage to say that if there is no problem, then there is no problem. However, smaller companies like itch.io have less power to push back, so it's important to keep the pressure on until the policies are completely reversed. You hear that, guys? We got to keep calm. We got to keep doing our thing. We are in it for the long haul. Hey, Pumpkin Spice Gob. I'm doing well. We're reading through the MasterCard, Visa, Steam, itch.io, AMA with EFF and ACLU. In terms of what to do, join the efforts that are already working, whether that's a petition or the call-in campaign. There's power in numbers. Our petition is here, and the info for calling and emailing can be found here. Oh my god, this linked out to me. What? Yay! Yippee! How did payment processors get it so wrong? Online sexual content is shown to reduce violent crime and reduce teenage pregnancy in the real world, and this has been shown repeatedly over the past 2 decades. Fictional animated images can literally never hurt people. Why do payment processors insist on ignoring reality? I'm a member of EFF and ACLU, by the way. Thank you for protecting our rights. One of the biggest problems here is that payment processors don't really have any interest in what is or isn't good policy. That's what makes them a good target for groups like Collective Shout. They don't have to debate, examine evidence, or gather political will through coalition building. They can just shut out content by convincing a few powerful companies it's in their interest. Yeah, payment processors care more about the question of risk and reputation than they do actually like what is fair or not fair. A lot of companies and people work that way. Doing pretty good. Glad to see someone walking through all this. It is truly my pleasure. I don't think we've really seen any journalists walk through this yet, and I'm very sad because this is a very important AMA. And shows that what we are doing is actively working. You know, the fact that so many of these major political advocacy groups are paying attention enough to do an AMA with like key policy folks, some of which more senior level, this is a pretty big deal. What sort of progress have you made in the fight against censorship? Are you doing anything about the Kids Online Safety Act, currently hoping to be pushed through the U.S. Congress, that was introduced by Senator Blackburn on 5/14/2025? There has been an attempt to push this act with different names through Congress and the U.S. multiple times under the guise of protecting children, when its true intentions are censorship with a pretty name. It needs to be stopped again. Thanks for your question, Screaming Angry Cat. COSA does keep popping up, most recently earlier this year, as you mentioned. The law is deeply problematic from a First Amendment perspective and won't even address the harms it claims to. We continue to rally our supporters and work to explain to legislators why COSA should not become law. Cliff. COSA has been a top priority for us at FFTF, as well as the other bad internet bills. Matt Lane. Visa and MasterCard have been wreaking havoc on several Japanese retailers for a few years now, to the point of attracting the attention of lawmakers and politicians. Are you in any contact with the Japanese side of things? Valve has also been blacklisting and blocking several Japanese visual novels for a fairly long time, even before this latest debacle, with publishers finding the situation incredibly vague and opaque. Thoughts? Unfortunately, nobody on the panel has enough familiarity with the Japanese retailer situation you described to speak on it. That's definitely something I'll be reading more about. As for Valve's prior censorship of Japanese visual novels, the lack of clear guidelines is a major problem, especially because Steam is far and away the biggest gaming platform. Access to the market has massive financial implications for developers. In the absence of clear rules or appeals procedures, the individuals making the final decisions have an enormous amount of power. The same concentration of market power that makes the payment processors a weak link in terms of censorship also makes the platforms a weak link. Both are concerning. JL. I want to note on this a couple things. First, if you've liked the vibes here, if you've liked getting the information, what you've seen, I am currently freelancing once more and kind of quasi a full-time VTuber, so I highly recommend, if you want to support me, subs and tips are always welcome. Hit the subscribe button. Using your Prime sub helps a lot. Subscribing will prevent you from seeing ads, so you get all of me all the time whenever I'm streaming. You never have to see a dumb, silly little ad. And thank you, Sarah. Tips go through Streamlabs. You get to leave a little message. I hear the little growing sound to represent me getting bigger and rounder and more giant because I'm a giant woman. And I highly recommend doing that as well. Otherwise, also, if you don't have any money to spend, that's completely fine. Someone might gift you a sub, and you can always hit the follow button, which helps a lot. Do you think Sesta Fosta helped snowball the current situation in some way? Absolutely. It got the foot in the door for this kind of censorship and was the start of this kind of censorship. I will politely ask for you to make a Blue Sky post about asking ours to do MasterCard Visa memes for reputational damage. You've got it. I've been meaning to do more of that. Lavender Incubus, hello. Remind me, I've got to hit you up sometime because I'd love to chat with you about commissioning art. I might have to save up my budget a little bit, but I'd love to commission you again. I hope you're doing well. But yes, Crossman, I'll do a post that's like, hey, like, let's do some art to like make fun of MasterCard and Visa, disparage them. I was thinking of maybe doing an audio too, like something, maybe another like, if you call or if you write, you get a free ASMR. I remember this stuff goes all the way back to shit like the Haze Code. Yeah, absolutely. Anna just femdom me for money. Do you want to be my PayPig Homer? Do you want me my PayPig? Do you anticipate litigation? If so, what cases do you think those curious should familiarize themselves with? Maybe, but a couple points. First Amendment law protects people from the government, not private entities. A good example of how this plays out when the government is the one doing the censoring is NRA versus VULO. There, a New York regulator used the government's power to encourage banks to quote-unquote sever ties with the NRA. This was a clear 1A issue because it was the government attempting to punish an organization based on their speech. Because of that, NRA won, with groups like ACLU supporting. I will say personally that I've been a little quiet about these sorts of things. But I've always leaned a little more toward free speech absolutism. It's why I think that I'm a big believer in the idea that like when you start having government regulation of speech, you start to open the floodgates to it being a weapon that can be pointed at you. When you create a gun, that gun will be pointed at the most marginalized people that a government governs, you know? So it is really important to have free speech rights, because when you have a lot of civil liberties for speech, you open protections up for the most marginalized in the society, which is often adult content creators, sex workers, LGBTQ individuals, trans folks. This is why so many of us really are big advocates for free speech, because we see our issues as interconnected, and also why a lot of us are advocates for organizations like the ACLU. Thank you. Hope you're doing okay. I know it's been a wild ride lately. It really has. I feel like...
Don't let Vor distract you.
Thank you for the tip, sweetie. Sarah. Oh, such a good little tiny. I appreciate you immensely, Sarah. You could portray Visa MasterCard like how Dadimomodachi portrays YouTube. Oh yeah, and I might DM you since it is almost done since it got updated. Please, thank you. I'd love to see. I heard that some work was being done on the certain commission. I feel like too few modern queer people are aware of the damage of the Hays Code and the Comic Code Authority. Yes, I agree. I do agree. I think a lot of people don't realize the history of these things. Just got back. How are things? Hope I didn't miss too much. We are still working through the AMA, so you're quite good. We've got a lot of time. You are good, sweetie. I hope you're doing well, Pat. Let's see. The same thing happened in a suit filed by Backpage, a classified ad site known for allowing adult ads and the subject of a number of criminal proceedings. But here, there is no government actor or use of government power. Backpage is another really good example where people originally were on the wrong side of this issue for a very long time, even though the advocacy groups understood very clearly the risks this put sex workers in. Thank you for the sub, Tender Miasma. How are you doing? I hope you're doing well. So the question is, do Itch.io and Steam have another cause of action? Possibly, but I would also stress that litigation is extremely expensive and takes up a lot of time, including employee and executive time that is almost certainly needed elsewhere. It can also burn bridges from a business perspective. I think also this is important to note when it talks about lawsuits taking up time. Even though this is a fight for the future, this goes back to what we were talking about previously with the ACLU kind of having its hands full right now. Like there's a lot going on with generally protecting our civil liberties. And I'm sure there is this feeling in the room as well. Like, what do they want to do? Open up this can of worms that'll take 5 to 10 years to figure out from a legislative political perspective? Or do they want to make sure that like the National Guard doesn't shoot people in the next like 6 months? You know what I mean? Like that's a bit extreme, but not that extreme, you know? This public-private actor distinction can be confusing and often lead to bad results. An example in the digital rights space is that the government can purchase surveillance data about you that it would be very illegal to collect directly. Cliff Braun. Let me read chat. And that a lot going on is part of the conservative playbook. Yeah, it's very true. I mean, the conservatives want us to be very, very distracted. Oh, this looks great. I love the way this looks, Ikaba. This is so cute. No. I love this. This looks great. I can't show it on stream, but it looks good. I love it. I hope you like the live reaction too, sweetie. You look so adorable like that. So cute. All right. Are there practical solutions to push for resolving this issue? How do we get the government to take it seriously and investigate? This is from OpenSFW. I understand companies like Valve, Gumroad, and Itch.io don't want to risk the relationship with payment processors, but aren't there whistleblower protections? Has any attempt been made to get them on any kind of record? Also, on user side, many creators and businesses were deplatformed without warning due to pressure from Visa and MasterCard. Shouldn't there be a mass petition or collective filing to the government to address this? Like, there are tons who are following rules that are moved erroneously, like they are making generic by-the-books content. Great question from Fight for the Future, JL. Are there practical solutions to push for resolving this issue? MasterCard and Visa were reportedly responding to pressure from an advocacy organization which organized people to call and email their payment processors in favor of removing adult content. Organized pressure in the other direction could help. How do we get the government to take it seriously and investigate? Contacting your elected representatives is a good place to start. Members of Congress write laws, but also have oversight responsibility to make sure the federal government is working as intended. And they do generally care about what their constituents want. Always call. Always call your reps. Whistleblower protections only apply in situations where the government is at fault, and so unfortunately won't help here. Valve and Itch.io could take action, and in a sense already have done so by coming forward about this. True, I agree. Shouldn't there be a mass petition or collective filing to the government to address this? I'm not a lawyer and can't speak to the litigation part of this question, but we would certainly like to see the creators, consumers, and businesses on the receiving end of this censorship organized against it. Much of our work is about internet censorship, and we have a campaign page on this issue, but these are first steps. They're shotgun blasting so much BS at us that we can't keep a front against everything they're trying to do. Part of it too is that the goal of advocacy groups and journalists like myself is to look at what's being shotgun blasted and catch the pellets, right? Like our job is to catch what's being fired at us and say like, this is something you need to pay attention to. You know, pay attention to this bullet, pay attention to this bullet. This bullet, it's a little fucked up, but like it's part of a larger issue that like we can't really address in any meaningful way. But this bullet you need to pay attention to. You kind of see what I mean a little bit? Like it's also the job of advocacy groups and journalists to help take in, we're a sponge for you guys, right? We're a big, chubby, round, soft sponge that takes in all of the shotgun blast. And we tell you which things you need to pay attention to and which ones maybe don't let it panic you. Does that make sense? We're experts in this. Our job is to let you know when you should be panicked or not. That's our job. Tried to call her up yesterday, got voicemail, so I just read some notes I made. Not too bad. Always, always, always leave a message if you hit voicemail. They do listen to the messages. Good on you, by the way, Pat. Great work. Call their rep at opening hours is best, at least getting to a rep secretary. That's good advice. I didn't realize that. That's good advice. What are your thoughts on Collective Shout's pressure campaign? What could have been done differently from Visa MasterCard? I appreciate your work. We fundamentally reject Collective Shout's perspective of internet content and believe that free expression must be protected. Among other reasons, campaigns to regulate sexual content online end up, intentionally or not, hurting the LGBTQ community. Queer content is often treated as inherently sexual, which gives fearful or malicious censors license to suppress it. Visa and MasterCard should have resisted the pressure. I do think their acquiescence should be understood in the broader context of the UK adopting UK OSA and the US considering KOSA laws that would censor the internet. We should not overstate the role of one organization among many in a broader movement advocating for online censorship, articulated as a defense of children's online safety. ML at Fight for the Future says, I'm annoyed at how effective it was, but Visa and MasterCard have historically been good targets for campaigns such as this. If I had one piece of advice for Visa and MasterCard, it would be that they will continue to be the target of pro-censorship campaigns and the subject of anti-censorship backlash until they remove themselves from that role. And there is no reason why payment processors should be involved in speech. Copy this, paste it, send it to everybody. There is no reason why payment processors should be involved in speech. Done. That's the message. How do we recruit some celebrities or studios to our side? It seems like too many influential people are content to sit on the sideline while the industry slides into capitulation. I have generally found that the AAA side of the industry does not really want to get involved because they feel like this is an issue that affects the indies, even though they will be affected. Fight for the Future is organized with celebrities before. For example, in this letter in support of libraries, it can be an effective way to get traditional media attention and can spark dialogue on social media. It's most effective when people close to an issue speak out about it. So in this case, that would be game developers. This may be more challenging in gaming when there are fewer individually recognizable artists than in more established mediums. And developers in big studios are typically burdened with legal restrictions on what they can say in public. Indie and solo devs are generally less restricted in this way, but also may have smaller platforms. If there are particular creators or studios you want to hear from, I'd suggest looking for their social media presence, seeing if they have posts about this, and if they haven't, asking them if they'd be willing to do so. By showing solidarity with devs, we can help give them the confidence to speak up. This is a really good thing. I'm going to just highlight this in chat as well. I think we should definitely be looking for more opportunities to get more people to continue to speak up. I think if anyone here has connections to bigger creators, definitely try to leverage them. I don't mean connections in the sense that like you're in their Discord and you pay for their Patreon. I specifically mean like you are friends with a major creator, right? Bring this issue up with them and ask them if they'd like to speak out about it if they haven't already. If you're friends with them, if you have a direct line of communication with someone, etc. What are important talking points to have when talking to our local politicians who are discussing having AI age verification in your country? My country doesn't have it, but I want to get ahead of it and protect online anonymity and free flow access to knowledge for my country's youth. Based on my experiences from ML, from Fight for the Future, I would recommend doing a bit of research first to make sure you are leading with points that would resonate with the person you are talking to and not accidentally giving them bad ideas if they have unfortunate values. For example, if they don't believe in online anonymity, you wouldn't want to lead with age verification's impact on privacy. That said, there are 3 main points on why age verification is bad. 1. Censorship. Both AI and content labeling are inaccurate, leading to people being blocked from accessing important content like information on wars, access to assistance with addiction, information on sexual health, etc. 2. Privacy. Make it personal. Would you want your face scanned every time you want to go on the internet? Wouldn't it make you feel like someone was tracking everything you are doing online, regardless of how the companies are actually handling that information? You can also tie this back to censorship because it will keep people away from important resources and information. 3. Security. Companies get hacked all the time, including age verification companies. Everyone that uses these services puts themselves at risk for a data breach. Some of the information being gathered is very sensitive. Don't be afraid of being sensational. Even if they are just storing faces, hackers could use those faces to generate deepfakes. You are opening your constituents up to the risk of scams or worse. This is actually fairly realistic. There has been a big uptick in voice cloning scams, and there was a hearing in the US Congress about it. Don't forget the tea leak, and there was also like mail tea, and that got leaked too. So this is like a major issue. EFF also has a great post on this topic. All right. Actually, we're almost done with the AMA. Wow. Big Red Little Wolf. So what can we do, and what is the ACU planning on doing on the whole to combat this? I see the petition going around all the time, and I've signed it myself. Is there a larger plan, or is it going to take smaller, more consistent collective action to make meaningful change? I often feel very directionless with these matters, and the situation is beginning to feel dire, especially with the introduction of laws like COSMA and COSA back on the books, though I understand that's separate from MasterCard and the video game situation. Thanks for your time. Collective action is important, and it's great when people take those steps. Most of my job is convincing Congress their bad bills are bad and unpopular. So when people like you call them and say that, it makes my job a lot easier. In terms of action directed at corporations, I've seen those that work and those that don't. This one seems to be working based on statements from the companies themselves. I'm a firm believer in doing what seems to be working until either we succeed or it stops working. I haven't seen any congressional interest in doing anything good on this yet, but hearing from their constituents that they don't think payment processors should have the power to censor games might change that. And lastly, the last answer from the matter, we got a little bit of the ACLU in here too again. Do you think adding decentralized form... Oh, we actually already read that. This is the Bitcoin question. We already read that one. Wow, that's it. That's the whole AMA. Pretty small AMA. I think maybe it didn't get as much public attention as it could have, but still a very promising one. I've never found this Reddit thread without you, Anna. I'm happy to spotlight it. And honestly, I didn't know that this was happening until Fight for the Future has me on like their press list, and they contacted me that this was happening, so I highlighted it. But it is a big W, guys. Oh my god, I spit in my monitor. Oh my god, I spit in my monitor. This is a big W, guys. This is not a small thing that happened. This is a sign that what we're doing is working, right? The calls are working. The public pressure is working. Calling advocacy groups and asking them to just kind of keep an eye out on this is working. This stuff is working. So keep at it. No matter what, keep at it. It's really important. It's really important. Keep at it, guys. We are heading in the right direction. No doubt. So yeah.